I'm not great scripted. Like I am best just being myself, opening up and allowing it to come through me, whatever comes through me. So for 3.5 years, I don't know if you ever saw this, but this is, probably like 3 years ago. For 3.5 straight years, every single Thursday, I never missed a single week. I had something called Train of Thought on Facebook Live. And so I started doing it when nobody was doing Facebook Lives. And so I built this really awesome audience from the beginning. And it was just a really fun way for me to kind of work through my own stuff and then utilize whatever I was navigating through to ultimately provide content and value to my people. And I was just so committed. And it was kind of like my live off the cuff version of podcasting. And I was just pouring into people, and it's how I filled all my courses, never spent a single dollar or dime on Facebook ads for any of my courses, anything. Like, it's just how I built connection with my people. Tell
me more about that mindset that you said, that I was just figuring out my own stuff as well as I was doing these lives. The reason why I asked this question is because I know a lot of the times we work with a lot of coaches, a lot of trainers, a lot of educators in different capacities. Either they could be professionally doing that, or they could be doing that in their companies and so on and so forth. And more often than not, and that's why I love how you led with, I don't prepare. I just let myself be the channel of whatever needs to come through me, because that seems to be the biggest resistance or the biggest roadblock in often individuals not communicating. How or what was the process that you kind of were like, I'm just going to go live every Thursday, I think you said at 9 a.m. or whatever the time was, and you said, I'm just going to go live.
6:57 p.m.
6:57.
Pacific Standard Time. Like, that was my time. And so, I think it's really interesting. People who must follow a script, I think it really just comes down to they don't trust themselves. They don't trust their connection to God. They don't trust their connection to source. They don't allow themselves to be that in direct alignment with that. Sometimes I don't remember what I say. And that's an indicator that I am fully just a channel. It's because it's not from me. If I give myself permission to be fully tapped in, fully connected to source, fully connected to God, then whatever comes through me, and then it isn't mine. And I think that that's the biggest thing, is like, we get to trust that our connection to source is whenever we allow ourselves to be fully trusting, fully surrender. It's not about me. So if I'm about to get on stage and I'm speaking to hundreds or thousands of people, and I find myself being really nervous, then what that tells me is I'm making it about me. I'm not making it about the audience. I'm not making it about the message. I'm making it about the messenger. And so the fastest way for me to kind of get rid of those jitters or that nervousness is to just ask myself, what do I want them to know? What do I want them to learn? What do I want them to walk away with? And the second that I make it about them, then I'm no longer nervous. Then I'm fully I'm a vessel. I'm there to serve. I'm there to be in servitude. And that's how I always really just remember that that's the purpose of me being there, is to deliver something.
That's beautiful. How did you build that trust with yourself, or how does anyone build that trust with that it will come through?
I think it's just practice, right? Like, I think in the beginning, when I first started speaking and I started training, I felt like I needed to have some kind of a script or some kind of a reference point. And I found myself kind of in that, in the moments where I actually got on stage one time and I asked the audience, I said, so I have this somewhat planned speech, but I'm kind of open to just throwing that to the side and just allowing it to come through me, whatever comes through me. And I gave them the option. I said, do you want my rehearsed scripted speech, or do you want me to just give you whatever comes through me? And they're like, give whatever comes through you. And so I went with it. I tried it on, and it felt so in alignment for me. I felt so alive in that. I didn't feel like I was trying to operate within these parameters. I just gave myself full permission to spread my wings and give them whatever was meant to come through me.
Beautiful. And would you say that would be a good first step for somebody who may be struggling to trust themselves, right? And there are many reasons for people to do that. There could be a backstory associated with it. It could be because they've made a false expectation in their head, or have an expectation in their head of what it looks like to be a great speaker and what it does not look like to be a great speaker. Do you have some kind of like, all right, the playbook could be, or potential playbook could be, or here are some things that you want to consider in that practice mode for a person to go from, I see why you can do it, Jenna. How do I do it?
I think that the best way to answer that is that works for some people. It also does not work for others. So I think that and it's a personality type. It's like, what's your archetype? What kind of a speaker are you? What kind of a communicator are you? What kind of a messenger are you? I think that just comes down to your relationship to source, your relationship to God. Are you, and because that also has taken practice for me, because I remember I look back at the very first Facebook Lives that I ever did and I cringe. I'm like, oh gosh, So it took practice and repetitions, took reps for me to develop that skill, and also just to practice trusting my relationship to God, to source, trusting myself in those moments. And I found that what has worked best for me, how people best relate to me, is when I fully surrender and I set down the need to look good, or the need to have it be right, or even the need to be liked. Because I think that the biggest thing for me in my development as a leader, my biggest ego conversation, my biggest fear is to be misunderstood. I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't want to have my intentions be misinterpreted. And that's something that I'm probably going to be working on for the rest of my life. And so kind of in that is just practicing what feels the best to me. And I think that the biggest way for most people, for those of you who are listening, watching, your body is at a tuning fork. I mean, your body's an instrument. So the things that feel best to you, it's not the the excitement, the butterflies, like a new relationship. You're like, oh, I've got butterflies. I actually think that's the universe saying, run the other way, because when I met Brad, my husband, I didn't have that. I mean, I felt like I was at home, and I feel like that was the best indicator of, okay, I'm right on track. Okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. So when I'm on stage and I feel no nervousness or butterflies or anxiety, I'm like, okay, I'm at home in my body. Okay, I'm right on track. I'm trusting myself. I'm connected to source. I'm not making it about me. I'm not worried what they're going to think about me. I'm okay if they judge me. I'm okay if they don't like me, because again, it's like, it's not about me. If I'm making it about myself, then that's the indicator of like, oh, I'm not on track. I'm not trusting myself. I'm not in alignment with God. I'm not being utilized. I'm focusing on my image. I'm worried about my ego. I'm worried about things that don't really matter. But when I'm feeling like I'm at home in my body, that's a clear indicator that I'm right on track.
I am curious about, because one thing that resonated with me as you were talking about how you've gotten really comfortable with what you do, is one of the things that we share with our audience or our students is that we tell them to practice in comfort, practice in your comfort zone, which I think is counter to what people are told generally. We are told always to be out of our comfort zone. We are always told to be uncomfortable in some way. And I think when you're doing something that's not difficult per se, but difficult to us, like in that moment, like you said, everybody's personality type is different. It's important for us to kind of keep ourselves safe in some way.
Sure.
Do you feel when you were just saying, hey, I'm going to just go do Facebook Lives, you were just, because I don't even know if it's going to land, you just felt safe, you were able to do it? Or you were like, no, I'm going to just push through this even if it feels unsafe?
I love what you're saying about that. Practice in a zone, in a space where it's kind of safe, it's comfortable. I think it's great to get reps that way with people you trust. Give me feedback. Tell me how this feels. How does this sound? What do you notice? What do you experience as I'm speaking about fill in the blank? And for me, I don't have fear about getting on camera. I don't feel nervous about speaking to people. So, it's interesting. I remember right in the beginning, what was the app? It was like it before Facebook Live. Now they're gone. I mean, it was the P? No, it doesn't matter. But it was like they were doing like the first live broadcasting thing, and they were cool for a second, and then Facebook Live became a thing, and then Instagram Stories, Instagram Live. It's just so that app is no longer. But I did my first live. I was like, who's going to watch me? I was like, it's kind of weird. I'm like, I guess I can go on and do a thing, but I had some people jumping on and commenting. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is kind of fun. And then I tried Facebook Live. I was like, no one, I don't think anyone's going to show up. But Facebook Live back then was pushing your, if you were live, they'd send everybody who was following you, Jenna Phillips Ballard is live. So that was really cool to see that people were interested in what I had to say. Mm-hmm. But I really just gave myself permission to just try it on. And, I mean, if you think about it, if you're doing Facebook Lives, for those of you who are maybe afraid to speak on stage in front of literally physically, you see thousands of people looking at you, a great place to start would probably be Facebook Live or Instagram Live, where it's just you with you and there's nobody actually there. So you can really kind of just practice that way. And then you're going to start to see, oh my gosh, wow, dozens of people are watching me. Oh, now hundreds of people. Oh, wow, now thousands of people. And that takes commitment because you got to show up. You got to be consistent. So I think that's probably the best place to start. If for those of you who are like, oh, I want to be a speaker. I really want to have this audience. Try doing a live because it's just you with you.
One of the things that I say is if you fear that you're going to be bad, post it anyways because nobody's going to watch it. So you don't have to be fearful of if somebody watches or not because it's going to be a bad video. Great. Nobody saw it. Amazing. But you posted. You moved forward. Jenna, let's change directions a little bit. So you are a trainer and a coach as well.
Mm-hmm.
What got you started in that? How did you get excited about all of this?
My previous lifetime, I was a personal trainer and a mindset coach for celebrities in Los Angeles. So I did that for about 10 years. And I remember one of my clients, her name was Jackie Warner, and she was a trainer. She was a celebrity trainer herself, and she hired me to be her butt trainer. I mean, my job was literally to sculpt her butt, and she had like 4 trainers. She had a boxing trainer, she had a strength coach, and I remember this one day we were talking, and she said to me, we were talking shop about the fitness industry and how to make it and how to be successful. And she said, if I can offer you one piece of advice, she said, never do it for the money. And I was like, huh. I was like, okay. And I was somewhat new in my career and built a really great roster of clientele. And my first private client actually was Ben Stiller. And so I got him in awesome shape. And so it just really supported me in getting my name out there. And I never forgot what she said. And I got to a point in my career where I realized that I was no longer passionate about it. I was collecting a paycheck and I found myself doing it for the money. And I was like, okay, it's time to pivot. And it was right around this time where I became really passionate about human behavior and emotional intelligence, somatic trainings. And I found myself being a student of this work and just fell in love with it. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I really poured myself into this work and hired just incredible mentors and worked with really incredible trainers that supported me in figuring out my own modality and kind of my own style and the way that I wanted to support people. And so I really brought my work, the same kind of work I was doing with my clients. I mean, I was transforming them from the inside out, but from like their muscles and their structure of their actual physical body. But I was like, I really want to work with them on a deeper level and a deeper capacity. Like I really want to go to the heart of who they are and evoke that from them and bring that to life. And that really inspired me. And so I just dove into leadership, dove into emotional intelligence, human behavior, and really studied that. And met my husband kind of in that time frame, and he became really passionate about that work as well. And then we picked up our lives out of Los Angeles, moved to San Diego. This was in beginning of 2016. And then we founded our leadership academy, our emotional intelligence academy, Ascension Leadership Academy. People affectionately call it ALA. And so that's how we started doing what we're doing. And we love it. It's our purpose, which has then, of course, brought us to Austin.
And what does the academy focus on as in training?
Specifically emotional intelligence. So it's all experiential, really hands-on. We support people in looking at the parts of themselves that are the best parts of themselves. And we have developed this curriculum, specifically like the context of the curriculum that we've really been able to provide people. We've graduated, I think now, well over 1,000 people. And we really support people at looking at themselves from within, from the inside out, and then also outside in, so that in real time they can understand why they get triggered, why they react in a certain way in high stress situations, why do they respond this way that's not in alignment with their authentic selves. And we give them really powerful tools to be able to identify that and then shift in a way that is going to be in alignment with what they want to create, the world they want to create, the relationships they want to have. They learn how to respond responsibly. And we all have the ability to respond, so to be response-able in a way that really supports them in bridging gaps and creating connections and having their vision be absolutely level 10. I mean, everyone's capable of having the life that they want. And it really comes down to being able to identify what's in your blind spot, what's getting in the way of you having a level 10 relationship, what's getting in the way of you having the kind of community that you want. So everyone's capable of that. You just get to really be able to see what's standing in your way.
Tell me, I'm still trying to grasp as to what exactly, or what is the tool that a person's getting? Is it more understanding themselves, or is it more how to regulate your emotional response?
It's being emotionally responsible and emotionally intelligent. So being smarter than your emotions. We all have fears. We all have triggers. We all have things that prevent us from being our most authentic selves. And being able to understand specifically where our triggers come from, because we're all born perfectly perfectly beautiful and perfectly capable and perfectly imperfect. And then, of course, we have these moments in our lives that start to create these walls, like our interpretations of the experiences and the events that we have. I'll give you an example. Like we're 3, we're 4, we're 5. We think that anything's possible. We think that we're beautiful. We love ourselves. And then something happens, some event, some experience takes place that has us start to shift the way that we view the world. We start to lose our faith in humanity. We start to lose trust in people. Someone that we look to for guidance says something that absolutely crushes us. Dad forgets to pick us up from school, or a family member abuses us physically, mentally, emotionally, sexually. Like we have these experiences in our early development as people, 3, 4, 5 years old, where we don't have the faculty, we don't have the tool set, we don't have the mindset, the ability to understand why these things are taking place. So we start to create this interpretation without this support system, and it oftentimes is not emotionally intelligent. I mean, we don't have those tools yet. And so when we start to have these experiences in our life and we start to create these interpretations, that actually limits us and prevents us. We find ourselves having fear about taking risks. We start to tell ourselves that we're not worthy, we're not lovable, we aren't capable. I mean, think about like the way that most people treat children. And it's just ongoing generational trauma. I mean, at some point we get to be responsible to interrupt that programming, that conditioning, and create a brand new pattern. And a lot of the stuff that we experience in our life, it's not our fault. I mean, the beliefs that we have about ourselves, about the world, it's not our fault. But it is our responsibility to create a brand new interpretation that is going to set us up for life and have us live our purpose.
Jenna, one of the biggest challenges that I believe is in our society is the challenge that you solve.
Mm-hmm.
We are very reactive as a society, and as a society, I believe that because we don't train from all the way as children, nobody talks about emotion or emotional intelligence. All you're told is to kind of like, don't be so mad, don't be so angry, quieten your voice, all that stuff that really impacts us later in life. The current generation that is there, and when I say current, I don't mean Gen Z only, Gen X, Gen Z, whoever you may talk about, has never really had a true education on understanding emotions. What is it that you found to be one of the most powerful or some of the most powerful tools that could help, say, a listener that may be struggling with the same? I really do believe that relationships, the reason why we have chaotic relationships in modern times, people have shorter engagements with their partners, or we're not so patient with our kids, is because we never learned how to really regulate. We just learned, maybe somewhere along the new narrative is just express yourself. Nothing wrong with that. But there is also relational intelligence, which may be a lot to do with emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. What have you found to be some of the most effective things that somebody could take? And do you even believe what I just said? Do you think that's any sense to that because you've worked with people on this field? And then if yes, then what is something that you found to be really powerful?
I think as far as a level of empowerment, and the most powerful way to shift some of the stuff is to create a powerful affirmation or a powerful I am statement that starts to interrupt your current experience, your current reality. Because if you think about fearful experiences or a reality where people create this interpretation and then start to create these in what most people would think is a truth, if we're experiencing anxiety or experiencing fear in our body, or something isn't feeling right in our body, the fastest way to kind of interrupt that, and something that I've found works for me, is what is this interpretation that I'm creating right now? Is this actually true? Like, what do I know to be actually true right now? Do I have all the information? Do I have all the data? Do I have facts? Do I have evidence? Because we start to create these fears or these interpretations about a conversation that went south or went a different direction, or we think about a conversation that we just had and then we're like, oh, I wish I would have said that, or they probably think this about me, or whatever interpretation we start to create. If we feel the sense of anxiety or fear in our bodies, it's an indicator that something is not in alignment. And I always ask myself, what's the fact right now? What's the truth? What do I know to be true? And then I bring it back to what I know to be true about myself. And I give myself a powerful affirmation that I'm loved, I am supported, I am infinitely provided for no matter what. I mean, we've all made it through 100% of our worst days. I mean, if we're sitting here and we're breathing, we're looking at our iPhone and whatever, method you're listening to this or watching this right now, you're fine. I mean, really think about it. You've gotten through 100% of your worst days. And if you think about the times in your life where you thought your whole world was going to crumble, you thought that everything was going to fall apart, and maybe it did fall apart, but honestly, it all came back together because you're sitting here, you're breathing, you've got a roof over your head, you've got food in your belly. So at the end of the day, we make things so much worse than they actually are based on our interpretation, based on the story that we tell, because we're focusing on something that we've experienced in our past, which has us then be afraid of the future, which takes us out of the present moment. So how can we bring ourselves to this present moment right here, right now? The only place that anything brand new can occur is right now in this moment. What do we want to create? What's the interpretation that we want to create that's going to have us feel at home in our body, calm, present, focused? Find your breath and breathe and create an affirmation that is, could be like a safe word for you. And for me, it's like, I always know that I'm infinitely provided for. My family is always provided for and taken care of. No matter what happens, no matter what the event is, I know that I'm going to be able to navigate it. I know that I'm going to be able to get through it because I have evidence, the evidence of my past. I mean, I was 17 years old. I fell out of my barn, landed on my head on concrete, found myself in a coma, woke up from the coma with brain damage. And it was a long road to recovery, and I got through it. So if I'm able to navigate that and heal through that and overcome that, then no matter what challenge I find myself encountering, I know that I can get through that as well.
So would you say one of what I'm hearing is one of the techniques that I'm getting beyond, how I am a formative statement, is that somewhere along the line, you kind of recognize that you always overcome things.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some version of a timeline in your mind where you go, the worst, whatever at that time I thought the worst has happened and I was through it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recommend that as one of the ways to, what I find is a lot of the times we know the technique, but we don't implement it. And that I feel like is something to do more with trusting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is I think that maybe, and I'm not saying I have quantitative data to prove it, but that's where my reflection is right now. It's like, why is it that we don't do things? Even if we know that this is what we should be doing, we know when we are angry, we say things that we don't like later. Like there's 100% of us have been after a whole blowout gone, why the fuck did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even mean it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we all have that, and some place we just don't. And I think that's the reason why we don't actually implement those ideas that we learn from a podcast like this, or from your trainings and so forth, from your Instagram stories. And you're a great presenter on Instagram as well. So do you feel that's something that is a missing piece, trusting ourselves to do things?
It's so interesting. We as human beings, we tend to go to what we know the most and what we're most familiar with. And what we're most familiar with is what feels the best because it's certain and we know the outcome. I have a friend who finds comfort in chaos, finds comfort in drama. And if there isn't drama and if there isn't chaos, it's created because that is what is most familiar. That's what's known based on a childhood narrative that was the norm. And so if it's not being created, then if it's not happening right here, right now, it's somehow created because that's what's comfortable. And so I think it's really important we have the information. We can read all the books, we can watch the podcast, listen to the podcast, we can, go to the transformational experiences and sit with ayahuasca and all these things. We get these downloads. And it's not until we are willing to confront our ego, to confront our 3D relationship with the self, that we're actually able to move through it and move past it. But it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to confront your ego because we can have the 5D wisdom, knowledge, information, interpretation, but we live in a 3D world. We have 3D egos and we're going to bump up against other 3D egos. So if we're not willing to confront those parts of ourselves, because when we come up against another ego and we can identify, we're like, oh, well, they're this way and they don't do that and they don't know that. And it's like, spot it, you got it.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it in that other person. How is that a reflection of you? And how can we be responsible, where we can not only identify that within ourselves, identify it with somebody else and really practice compassion and practice forgiveness and practice meeting people where they are. So I think it's really important to know that, again, people will go to what they know. And as uncomfortable as that may be, whether it's chaos or drama or, sabotaging relationships, I'm going to leave them before they leave me kind of thing. As uncomfortable as that is, it's actually comfort because it's what's known. And so we've got to be able to identify those parts about ourselves and be willing to do the work, be willing to get really messy and really uncomfortable and confront those parts of ourselves and stand toe to toe with our ego and do shadow work and like really identify these parts of ourselves if we actually want to move through it. And I believe that our wounds are our wounds. I think that they're always going to be there. I believe that the work is never done. It's like the ego likes to believe that like, oh, well, I've killed my ego and I'm done with it. It's like your ego is always going to be with you. So developing your relationship with the ego. And actually, I believe that our ego is actually our most powerful compass. Because when we experience parts of our ego, it's like, oh, I really don't like that about myself. And oh, I really hate it when I do that. And I hate it when I say, oh, it's like, okay, that's just an identifier. That's something showing up for you because that's not who you want to be. Who you actually want to be is your authentic self, like the most beautiful parts about you. And so for me, I utilize my ego as a compass, as a kind of like an identifier of when I get triggered or when I get activated. It's just it's a reminder for me that like I don't want to show up that way. Who I want to be is loving. Who I want to be is compassionate. Who I want to be is forgiving. And that's my work. My biggest work is forgiveness. So I think that I'm always going to find ways, my ego is always going to find a way to practice that. And that's my biggest work in this lifetime.
And how did you start the journey of confronting your ego? Or identifying that that's the concentration you need? I
mean, truthfully, it was in my head trauma accident when I was 17. Prior to my accident, and this is also when I learned that I had the ability to manifest literally anything. I found myself in a really, really dark spot leading up to my accident. For about 3 or 4 months, I used to lay in bed at night and wish that I could witness my own funeral. I would obsess about it because I wanted to be able to see who would show up, because I had this story that I didn't matter, that I didn't have any friends, that people didn't care about me. So I'm like, if I could just witness my own funeral, then I would see who actually cared about me. Then I would see who was actually my true friend. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to die, because if I die, then what am I going to do with that information? So I started focusing my energy on what would it be like to be in some kind of an accident that would be serious enough for me to be in the ICU. I was very specific about that. And in that, I fast forward, was in a head trauma accident, woke up in the ICU out of a coma with brain damage and had no short-term memory. And it was almost like I had this rebirth, because I was in this hospital room and I kept forgetting why I was there, but people kept showing up, and they kept showing up in such a way that I felt supported and I felt loved and I felt like I was important and that I actually mattered. And so that was the information that I needed to have. I asked the universe for it, and the universe gave it to me. So we can manifest anything that we focus our energy on long enough, whether it's desirable or undesirable, we're going to manifest it. And so it was kind of in that whole experience that I got to really understand that my purpose was to utilize my pain, like turn my pain into purpose, and utilize my most painful experiences to use my voice for people that didn't have a voice, or didn't know that they could have a voice, or they didn't know that they mattered enough to have a voice. And so it really started around that time. I just have become very passionate about doing shadow work, because that's the work.
What do you mean by shadow work?
Shadow work is confronting your ego, confronting the dark parts of yourself, the parts that you hate, the parts, I'll speak from the parts about myself when I'm doing shadow work is the parts about myself that I'm not proud of, the parts of myself, it's like the private conversations where I say things to myself that I would never, ever say to anybody else. I would never, ever say to a child. But it's the internal conversations that we have, like, you're stupid, you don't matter, you're not enough, no matter what you do, it'll never be enough. Like those internal conversations that we would never share with anybody else. But I mean, we all have an inner child as well. So if you think about it, I mean, you're a father, you have children, you would never say the things that you say to yourself, you would never say those things to your children ever. But we say those things to our inner children all the time. And we forget that. We forget that we have this inner child within ourselves. And so it's remembering that. And our ego really honestly wants to protect our inner child. Our ego doesn't want us to be embarrassed or to have an experience where we're gonna find shame, or we're gonna be falling flat on our face. So our ego tells us to play it safe, stay small, don't go for the risky things, because we don't want to fall flat on our face. We don't want to experience failure. We don't want to experience risking and then having it not work out. So our ego is really honestly trying to protect us. And so if we start to develop a new relationship with our ego, with our shadow, and we can actually find gratitude for that part of ourselves. Like, thank you for wanting to keep me safe. Thank you for wanting to protect me. But I have a much bigger purpose than the level of your voice. My purpose is louder than your voice. And so I'm going to have that be the loudest part of myself, is standing in my purpose and standing for what I'm here to cause and create in this lifetime. And, the only thing that's going to ever stand in the way of us having everything we want is a small, tiny limiting belief. And if we listen to that voice and we listen to our shadow, we listen to our ego, and we believe that that is true, like, I'm not worth it, I don't matter, I can't, I won't, I never will, then that's the stuff that prevents us from having everything that we desire. And you think about how many people bring their dreams to the grave. How many people are laying on their deathbed thinking back and going, man, I didn't have that conversation. I didn't go after it. Oh, that one got away. Oh, I never went for it. I mean, the founder of Starbucks, I'm making up this, he heard no 200 something times. Mm-hmm. He was going for, I'm totally paraphrasing, but I think that it was something to the effect of, he was trying to get a loan for starting Starbucks. And he kept hearing no, 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 no. Most people would stop after 5 times. Most would stop after 1. Yep. For sure. Most people would stop after 20, 30, 40, 50 times, but it was something like 200 plus times until he finally got the yes. And now look what he's created. It's a global impact.
That's very, very true. So what I've understood is shadow work is to identify what are those parts of you that you're uncomfortable with, or that you would only do to yourself or be in private. And then the second step that I understood of the work, and I'm just trying to kind of gauge, okay, there's shadow identification, which is, this is the shadow. And then there's the shadow work, which what I understood of this conversation is to express gratitude towards it and then move on and let the real self or the other self take over the leap, or is there something more that is involved?
I would say that's one way to do shadow work. Is, I think, a great way to utilize your ego and utilize your shadow is to find gratitude for it. But actual shadow work it's painful. I mean, you will experience having an ego death. I mean, the ego will never, ever go away. People try to kill the ego and be done with it forever, but the ego will never go away. It's a part, we actually need our ego. It's a part of ourselves that actually supports us. And so if we give ourselves permission to utilize it as a tool to remind us of who we authentically are in those moments where we get triggered, in those moments where we find ourselves being up against it, and our ego wants to keep us safe and keep us in this little box, it's actually a tool that we can utilize. So I don't believe in killing the ego once and for all. I don't believe that's even possible. So people do it with, people will sit with ayahuasca, or they'll sit with plant medicine again and again and again and again and again, because they're trying to just kill the ego once and for all, but we can't. Our ego is a part of ourselves. So be in relationship with that. I mean, imagine going on a road trip with somebody that you freaking hate. You're driving cross country from California to New York, and you freaking hate this person. That would be horrible. So how can you create joy in that? How can you be like, all right, man, we don't get along, but let's find some music that maybe we can kind of enjoy together. And, I'm going to roll down the window. I'm going to enjoy the scenery. And I don't really enjoy you all the time, but I'm going to find a way to just agree to disagree. Can we just agree to disagree? Let's find joy in this road trip, because there's no escaping it.
Beyond the shadow work, what has been some of the most powerful experiences you have had that has led you to create your own methodology? Well,
a lot of people don't really know the work that I do. I don't talk about it a lot, but there's nothing I won't talk about, so I'll talk about it here. I'm an energy healer. I'm an energy worker. I've really found a deep practice with plant medicine, and I've sat in countless ceremonies. And the work that I do, kind of like the Trojan horse, is ALA. I mean, people come through ALA, and this is, of course, it's a lot of ego work. It's a lot of 3D work. But the work that I'm most passionate about is more 5D, working with people's energy and healing that, and working with people's energy grids and clearing. And so there's the work that I do is, I can't really put, it's not really a way I can actually describe it. It's pure energy work. So that's the stuff that I'm most passionate about. Of course, I love to obliterate people's egos for a short while, but the ego is always going to come back. It's not going to be gone forever. But I love to do that work. But the work that I love to do with people it's a much higher level of transformation.
That was smart. This is a very open audience.
Yeah,
We have all kinds of people that listen to our podcast.
Absolutely.
And they all believe in energy works.
Yeah. So the work that we do at ALA is we didn't create that curriculum. We didn't create that methodology. I mean, the curriculum that we provide, here's what I'll say. The context of what we create at ALA is very specific, and it's our own context that we've really created there. But the curriculum there, I mean, the curriculum's been around for decades. We've adapted it in a way that is applicable to today's leaders. And we've really shifted the curriculum that has really created an opportunity for people to look at the parts of themselves that really does work.
And ELA is the emotional intelligence part.
Yes. So that's our emotional intelligence work that we do. And we teach leadership, we teach effective communication, we teach radical ownership, responsibility. Because if you look at the world as it is right now, I mean, people who are quote unquote leading us, I think there's a huge gap. There's a drought of responsible leadership. And so that's my stand, is to impact the most leaders as possible, like really support people in learning what it means to be authentic, what it means to be humble, what it means to be transparent as a leader, because I think there's a shortage of that today. But once people go through our process, I then develop an opportunity to create a deeper connection with people and do actual work on their energy, on their fields, who they authentically are. And so sometimes that's with plant medicine, sometimes it's absolutely with no medicine at all. But I give people an opportunity to really tap into the parts of them, like the essence of who they are, to awaken that from within themselves and like surrender the parts about themselves that don't work. It's really, it's hard to describe. I mean, it's like, I don't even know how to, I've never actually talked about it. Like literally I've never talked about it. The work that I do with people, of course there's ALA, I talk about it all the time, but like the actual work that I'm most passionate about, working with the actual essence of people, their energy, and working with their grid and clearing certain parts of themselves that it's just energy. It's just stuck energy that's in their grid. And so I literally pull it up and out of them and like cast it back into the light, the parts of themselves that is confused energy or dark energy. I don't like to say dark energy, because I believe that energy is energy, right? Like, and we can have a judgment about, oh, this is dark or this is bad, but there's confused energy and there's stuck energy that just really wants to go back to the light. And so I support people in moving that through. And
this is one-on-one work, or
this is really, really intimate. This is really intimate work. Sometimes one-on-one, really just specific, and it's more private. So it's like we have ALAs, we have bigger groups. We'll have, like this past weekend, we had 53 students graduate from level 1, which is awesome. And that's the discovery training. That's when they discover the source of all their triggers, why they react and respond the way that they do. And then level 2 is the breakthrough process, where they get to confront their ego. And the first half of the training, it's a 4-day training. First half of the training is incredibly uncomfortable. It's confrontational. It's interruptive. Feedback, giving and receiving feedback that in any other situation you probably would not be receiving or giving. And you get to really see why you respond the way that you do. It's undeniable. Like it's absolutely undeniable. In the second half of the training, people experience being absolutely unbridled, completely confident, courageous, embracing every single part of themselves that otherwise they necessarily would not be presenting to the world. And it's really powerful. And then they begin level 3 after that.
So ALA probably works on the psychological level, and the work that you're talking about, or the work that you're exploring, or the work that you don't talk about enough is probably more related to the spiritual realm, the realm that we as society are still exploring.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would say, again, ALA, the work we do at ALA is more, it's ego work. It's shadow work. It's confronting the parts of yourself that do not work and allowing the parts about yourself that really work and having those come to a whole other level, like really giving yourself permission to be that. Like I'll give you an example. So I've really come into ownership and recognition and awareness of the fact that I want to have a rap album. Like I'm just announcing it. I'm going to release a rap album at some point in my life, because I've not allowed myself to embrace that of me and about me, but I downloaded 4 amazing abundance mantras that have original music that basically the music was matched with what came through me. And so I recorded this in a studio and we produced videos. And so I'm like, okay, so how to take it to another level? Okay, I want to do a visual album, because in the videos that we have now, it's not me, it's people, because I'm not making it about me. I'm like, it's not about me, it's not about, and I'm like, actually it is about me. Have you seen Lemonade? Beyonce's Lemonade, her visual album, that is a whole other level of magic and artistry. I'm like, and I get to embrace my artist. So I'm in a season now where I'm embracing my inner artist, and I want to produce albums. I want to produce music. I want to create this whole other outlet for myself that's going to allow me to be the fullest expression of me. And so I stand for other people to be that. And I'm finding this part of myself that's coming to life. And that's the next chapter for me, is just embracing my own inner artist.
And you discovered that inner artist as you were more tapped into your ego work, or you were more tapped into your spiritual work?
I would say it's when I gave myself permission to embrace the healer part of myself. When I really started to sit with medicine in a way, plant medicine in a way that unlocked this whole aspect of me. And it was when I was pregnant with Jax, my firstborn, that I channeled this abundance. It was an abundance course. And it was 5 weeks before he was born. I had all this creativity moving through me. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to release this course. I want to support people in knowing that they have the ability to create literally anything that they want. And so I channeled this abundance course, and I think it was a matter of like 3 days. And in one studio sitting, 4 abundance mantras just came through me. No notes, no preparation, closed my eyes, channeled these mantras. And the producer who helped me to create this, and he basically created the music to go with it. And I was like, okay. And with these tracks, I produced these videos and basically created this abundance course, launched it, released it, no ads, just like released into the universe, and organically enrolled dozens and dozens and dozens of women, and released it, and like then gave birth to my son. And then of course, right before I'm about to give birth again to my second, Jet, I had all this creativity coming through me, and I started writing a book in 2020, and I felt all these blocks. And then of course, right before I'm about to give birth, I'm like, okay, I'm finishing the book. And I was joking, I was talking with my coach, I'm like, I got to finish my book before my son is born, because then of course I'm going to be a new mom, and when am I going to have time and all the things. So his due date was May 2nd. And I said, I got to finish my book. I'm declaring that 4/22/22, because I love those numbers, 4/22/22, I'm going to be done with my book. I'm declaring it. That's it. And I joked with her. I said, just watch. I'm going to hit the last period on the last page, last sentence, last chapter. I'm going to send it off to my editor, and then I'm going to go into labor. And that's literally what happened. I literally finished my book, sent it to my editor. I was like, oh, okay. I'm early stages of labor. All right. And I basically was in labor for 2.5 hours, and was at the hospital an hour later after I started feeling all these contractions, pushed 8 times, and there he was. So he literally, I gave birth 4:23. So it was like, 2 a.m. But I mean, we have the ability to give birth to anything, literally, figuratively. I gave birth to a book and a baby literally within hours of each other. And so it's being the practice of trusting that about ourselves, knowing that we can create whatever we desire when we trust ourselves, when we give ourselves permission to know that we have the ability to manifest whatever we want, and know that we're not separate from God. We're directly connected to all of it, everything that exists literally right now. That's when we can manifest anything we want in an instant. We just get to remember that we have the ability to do that.
Is there a practice that helps you be more connected to the 5D world? Is there something beyond plant medicine, because that's not accessible to everyone that's a listener of this podcast? But apart from that, is there something that you're like, that's when I feel really tapped in?
Yeah, when I talk to God, if I feel that I'm not connected to source, I find myself not being in direct connection, or I find myself feeling anxious, or not at home in my body. I just really just find my breath, taking some really deep breaths, and I ask myself and also God, what do I know to be true right now? Mm-hmm. What do I know to be true? Is the story that I'm making up factual? Is it actually what's happening right now? And almost 99.99% of the time, it's not. So what's happening right now in this moment, you and I are having a conversation. And if you think about it, the only thing that would not have me be present right here, right now, is I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, I got to pick up my son at this time, and like, oh, I got to do this and that. It's like the anxiety. It's the focusing on the future based on things that we've experienced in our past that we're then bringing forth into the present moment, which is not possible because the past is over. It doesn't exist. We're like, oh, well, then we start thinking about the future, and we're like stressed out about it because that's the only thing that can rob us of being present. This conversation that we're having right now is so special, and it matters, and it's going to impact people. I mean, this is the only thing that's real right now. What's happening right here, right now, this is the only thing that's real. Everything else is an interpretation. Everything else is made up in our minds. We have no idea what's happening outside of this room. So this right here, right now, is the only thing that's happening. And what's happening right now is we're having a beautiful conversation. So if I'm not here with you and like connecting to God and having this information come through me to you, to the people who are listening, then I'm robbing myself of this connection I'm having with you. I'm robbing the people listening. So I am at home in my body. And so if we are finding ourselves in fear, we find ourselves having some kind of an anxious conversation or interpretation, it's because we're not allowing ourselves to be connected to God. So breathe. What do you know to be true? Like, is this fearful thing that I'm allowing myself to entertain, is it actually true? And oftentimes it's not.
So true and so beautifully said. Jenna, is there something that our students can learn about ALA, about your other work? Is there a place where they can go and learn more about?
Absolutely. You can find me anywhere across the interweb, Jenna Phillips Ballard. I'm literally the only one in the entire universe, so I'm easy to find, Jenna Phillips Ballard. There are a lot of Jenna Phillipses, a lot of Jenna Ballards, but only one Jenna Phillips Ballard. So you can find me there all over social media. You can go to my website, jennaphillipsballard.com. You can also go to ALAEQ.com, EQ like emotional intelligence, ALAEQ.com, and then you can find out more about our trainings there. But really easy to find me on social media.
Amazing. Is there anything that you'd like to share as a closing thought, as a closing note to our listeners?
Thank you for that question. You matter. What you're here to cause in this lifetime is important. The world needs you to trust yourself, trust God, and trust the timing of the universe.